Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and Mr. James Junkin, still celebrating Mardi Gras.
Happy no Mardi Gras from down on the bayou.
Yep.
King cake time,
How long are we
baby.
going to be celebrating down there for? How long does Mardi Gras go?
Mardi Gras goes from 12 days after Christmas to Fat Tuesday.
All right. When is Fat Tuesday?
I think it's February the 17th-ishes. Sometimes it blends over into Ash
So we're gonna.
Wednesday. If it's near a weekend, we just roll it into the weekend.
So does that mean we're going to miss you dressed up like Cupid because it goes up to the 17th? So no Cupid in the diaper
no
with
Cupid.
the
Mardi Gras trumps
donut?
Valentine's Day.
I'm really I'm upset about that. I was kind of waiting
know.
for the shirtless diaper look with the with the bow and arrow.
You'd rather have a box of chocolates than a king cake.
Yes, I would.
Something wrong with you, Doc.
There is a lot wrong with me, James. So let's let's move into rip from the headlines and get on with the show. What do you got for me today?
Breaking news out of the EPA.
EPA.
Yeah, prompted by evaluation that identified unreasonable risk to worker health, the EPA has begun to regulate industrial exposures related to various plastic derivatives or the derivatives that are used in plastics, some chemicals that are used in plastics. I'm going to give you full disclosure. I cannot pronounce all of these, but there is a news release that's out there. Safety and Health magazine put this out, which is a publication of the National Safety Council. Whip on over there. I'll try to post a link to this on my LinkedIn page. You can scroll down and find it. But I think that's great. As everything in life, just about that we use, when you think about it, we use a lot of plastics in just about everything. If there was no plastic ever, think about all the things that we use from just sitting here at my desk, this pen, the cell phone cover, that TV, that microphone, that light. There's just plastics everywhere, right? So it's become part of modern life, modern existence. We need to protect the workers that make those conveniences now possible.
Well, and I think James, some of the impetus for this is the general public as well. One of the things that I saw in the environmental industry, and a lot of my colleagues that are still in the environmental industry are dealing with, are those phthalates and other microplastics in the water supply, right? And so this is a natural segue into air and inhalation hazards, etc. I did see the other day on the local news. I live near the ocean, as do you, and they actually a lot of what washes up on the beaches now are microplastics, and they actually have machines that are going out and trying to pick these up from the sands, and minimize the pollution, if you were, and those other inhalation and drinking water hazards, right? So there's a big push for this. I'm not surprised about it. There are a lot of people that say, it doesn't matter, or there are a lot of people that are for removing them. I mean, we're not trying to make any kind of judgment on that, but I'm not surprised that EPA is taking this up as a mantle, right? And on that note, I want to say that if our listeners want to hear some more on environmental risks, you and I can speak to those too. So if you have an environmental risk that you want us to talk about a little bit on the show, happy to do that.
There's probably something that's vastly overlooked in the field of EHS is the E. Right. Sometimes the H, and it really just comes down to a lot of the S, right?
Yeah.
But I think
some people may know this or not know this, but I spent a long time in the solidly in the E portion of the EHS, and James, I know you worked on the oil spill down for BP. So we've got a little bit of expertise there, and we'd be willing to bring on guests and to talk about those things too. So just wanted to bring that up. Let's weave into our show. Our LinkedIn articles have been getting a lot of traction, both with our followers on LinkedIn, but with our followers and listeners here on the Risk Matrix. And one of yours one of your articles got a great showing of support, liking, etc. What was that, James?
I tell you, life's crazy. The things I think people would be interested in, nobody likes. The stuff I think is kind of routine and boring, boom, 81 people think it's cool. So we throw it out there for you. There's no monetization involved in publishing these articles. It's really designed by Dr. Martin and I to help give back to the profession and to help you improve your practice based on lessons we've learned from others or in our many years of practice in safety where it's come up, issues have arisen. And I would say there's probably nothing more confusing and misapplied and debated than OSHA's multi-employer citation policy, right? It may be only, I don't know which is first, OSHA record keeping or OSHA's multi-employer citation policy. But both of them can be very confusing. I wrote this article. It's entitled "The Safety Professional's Guide to OSHA's Multi-Employer Citation Policy." And as of now, Supreme Court rulings, court cases have come down decidedly on OSHA's ability to cite multiple employers for exposures. What this means is your worker may not have been exposed, but if you were involved in the chain of responsibility related to exposure of the hazard, you can be cited whether or not your employees were directly involved or not. And that brings a lot of focus when you're talking about hiring clients, general contractors, and subcontractor relationships, or hiring clients, contractors, and subcontractor relationship, or just plain contractor subcontractor relationship. So I threw it out there for some discussion to give people something useful, not necessarily from that of an attorney, but something useful when developing your management programs and who's responsible on job sites.
So let's break it down to just the basics here. I'm just going to give a basic overview of what a multi-employer worksite is, and then we can launch into some of the points that you made. For most of our listeners probably are aware of the multi-employer worksite place policy, have read your article, or have heard about it in school. But for those of you who don't know, multi-employer worksite is a project where two or more employers, like a general contractor and a subcontractor, they perform work simultaneously as part of that project, right? This type of arrangement allows for high levels of specialization, like a general contractor can hire an electrician, a plumber, a masonry contractor, etc. They all work under them. But it introduces, as James says, legal and safety complexities, particularly as it relates to OSHA liability. Okay, so that's just the overall umbrella of what we're talking about here, right? So James, why don't you run down in your article a few of the things, and let's chat about it, a few of the points that you made.
The first thing everybody needs to understand is I'm a big proponent of reading and understanding your source material. And I like to say people read OSHA regulations like they read the Bible. Everybody knows what John 3:16 says. Nobody got a clue what John 3:15, 17, third book of John, how all that works. We just go to a standard and say, where does it say I need to be clean shaven? Where does it say I need to be this? Well, you're not going to find the words within the regulations, multi-employer citation policy. You're going to need to go to the CPL and download the CPL. And if you're a hiring client, if you're a contractor that hires subs, or you're a general contractor, this CPL is your friend. It's CPL 02-00-124.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there. You're using acronyms. What does CPL stand for?
I don't know what.
Stump the chump. I think
Stump
it's compliance policy, something. But when you use something like that, you got to make sure that you tell people what that is. It's CPLs live on the OSHA website, right? And you can download these compliance policies, and they will talk about specific things, right? I don't know what the L stands for.
Means 100%, but I'll tell you, I know what it does. These are instructions that go out from Washington, D.C. to the area offices that direct the OSHA area offices and the state plans on enforcement activities. For example, the field operations manual, that's CPL. That gives instructions to area directors and compliance officers on how to conduct an inspection. Chapter 3 is your friend. So for all of you that are out there preparing for OSHA inspections, go download that and get Chapter 3. But this is something a little different.
Directive is what it stands for. I don't know how to do that. Compliance Policy Directive. I don't know why we have an L and not a D, but maybe
only the government would put an L instead of a D if it's called Compliance Policy Directive. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to pull that up for you.
So in looking at how OSHA interprets that, there are 4 roles related to multi-employer citation. There's the creating employer. That's the employer that causes the hazard. And they can be cited even when only other employees are exposed. So if I'm on the site, I create the hazard, my workers create the hazard. For example, I remove a guardrail or remove a ladder for access, for emergency egress, something like that. My employees aren't exposed. I'm the creating employer. I created the hazard. Even though my workers aren't exposed, I exposed other people. I can be cited. The exposing employer. That's the employer whose actual employees are exposed, right? That's W-2 employees. That's employees that may be temps that you're directing to work. Even if you did not create the hazard, the exposing employer must exercise reasonable diligence and take steps consistent with its authority to protect its employees. What does that mean? You're responsible for the safety of your workers. Then there's the correcting employer. And that's an employer who's engaged and, basically has the responsibility to correct the hazard. And in other words, if I was a maintenance company that was supposed to conduct guardrail maintenance, you must exercise reasonable care. And we're going to talk about reasonable care as we get through the podcast today, because a lot of this is built upon reasonable care. And then this last one is where a lot of confusion is. Controlling employer. That's the party that has general supervision authority, general supervisory authority over a job site. Now, that can be a hiring client. That most often is the general contractor. They must exercise reasonable care to detect and prevent hazards, violations of safety procedures, to the extent that those measures that you take are influenced by things like the project scale, the pace of the operations, the compliance history of subcontractors. So all that goes into play when you're thinking about multi-employer citation policy. And we're going to talk about reasonable care here in a moment. But you heard that last part, right? Taking into consideration the compliance history of subcontractors. So if you're a hiring client hiring a contractor, if you're a contractor hiring a sub, a lot of times what you'll see is, well, we delegated our responsibility by contract through indemnification and hold harmless language to these others. But there are some non-delegatable, right? Delegatable responsibilities.
So let me just give you a summary there, James, of kind of what you said, right? I mean, before we get into, the risk and et cetera, right? There are some pros and cons of having a multi-employer work site. Okay, so let's just roll back a little bit, right? You can specialize, you can have different areas of expertise. Sometimes it's more cost efficient. You mentioned scalability, right? And risk transfer is a big thing, right? We all think that if we have the right contract in place, et cetera, that, it's not our problem, right? And we also can optimize our resources. So those are some of the pros, right? But the disadvantages that you're going over now, right, is there's this shared regulatory liability, right? That's what this is all about. Regardless of how you do it in your contract or what you're doing to make the work site run efficiently and optimize your resources, etc. There's deep pocket risk, right? Which is basically, just like somebody who's going to sue, they're going to go for everybody that they can sue. OSHA is going to go for everybody who's on the hook for that risk, whether it's creating, controlling, correcting, exposing, etc. Right? So that's where the cons come in of these big work sites, right? And then, there are other things that are cons of a multi-employer work site, like, diluted culture, right? You start to get into people not knowing what other people are doing or not agreeing with what their culture is. There's some administrative burden that goes with that. And there also becomes communication and coordination gaps, which result in OSHA violations or,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, injuries and fatalities. So I just wanted to put that in there, James, before you get rolling with the risk, because that is the biggest con there, is the deep pocket risk.
Absolutely. And so a lot of times we hire contractors for specialization, etc. But one of the benefits is the transfer of risk. We're trying to transfer risk to someone else, right? However, when we have indemnification and hold harmless language, we're transferring financial risk. You cannot transfer OSHA risk. Okay? OSHA does not recognize that risk transfer, and it does not extinguish OSHA's ability to cite you as a controlling employer in a multi-employer citation situation. Nor does it diminish that particular employer's non-duty that cannot be delegated. So that's all codified in the law. There's a bunch of different cases that are out there. If you want to Google this and look it up, Acosta v. Hansel Phelps Construction, Solis v. Summit Contractors. Those are seminal cases, foundational cases that establish all of this, right? So what is one to do? You must exercise, here's a legal term, reasonable care. Now let's talk about reasonable for a second. All right. This is plain language from the country, James Junkin. Reasonable is a legal term. Okay. How is reasonable defined? Well, what actions most people would take if given the same set of circumstances. If we end up in a courtroom somewhere, who's going to be deciding if we act reasonably? It's definitely not going to be a bunch of general contractors or a bunch of hiring clients or even a bunch of safety professionals. It is the general public. So I tell people, if you want to pick a jury, you want to see what a makeup of a jury is going to be like, go to Walmart. Pick the first 12 people that come out of Walmart. That's your jury. That's who you have to convince that you acted reasonably. And if we're getting to that point, something bad has happened. Okay? Something bad has happened. But there are some elements to reasonable care for hiring clients and general contractors. How do I act reasonably in my exercise of control and authority of the work at the job site? Well, here's some things. If I have to demonstrate to OSHA that I have acted reasonable, having a site safety program and reviews or rules. What are the rules for the site? Communicating that in contracts, communicating that in site orientations, having contractor kickoff meetings.
Having a subcontractor management system. Having a subcontractor management system before you ever get to site.
Before you ever get there, right? We want everyone to know what the rules are, what the expectations are. It's made plain and clear. Then you need an inspection regimen, right? So when we think about, we've told them what the rules are, now we have to go see, is my general contractor abiding by the rules? Are my subs abiding by the rules? It's not just, hey, here's 1910, 1926, y'all abide by the rules. Are we taking reasonable steps to ensure compliance?
Don't make rules if you're not going to check that they're being followed.
And part of that inspection is what we call contractor and subcontractor prequalification. Part of that is examining contractors' inspection history, looking at their OSHA 300 logs for lagging indicators, workplace injuries, certainly citations, certainly fatalities. It's going to be hard to demonstrate that you exercise reasonable care when you hire a contractor that has, or a subcontractor that has a total recordable injury rate 5 times that of the national average.
Let me just sneak in there, James. If you're going to ask for all these things, if you're going to ask for their safety program, you're going to ask for their OSHA logs, you're going to ask for those things, you better damn well be looking at them and have some litmus of good or bad. And if you're not going to do it, you should have somebody who's doing it on your behalf.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's where there's given the rise of contractor risk management systems like Veriforce and others that are out there that look at contractors and subcontractors' history, their OSHA logs, their citation history, their policies, and then we're going to get to this next thing, training, right? Ensuring that your contractors and subcontractors have a documented training program, having orientation programs. This is all part of exercising due diligence when we're talking about OSHA's multi-employer citation. And then documentation of hazards. We did our due diligence to identify hazards, to ensure abatement of those hazards. All of those taken as a whole are part of the reasonableness pie, if you will, that OSHA looks like when determining for citations on a multi-employer citation site. Now, there's some defenses, right? There's defenses. Now, I said this gets very controversial. One of the primary defenses that I hear hiring clients and general contractors using all the time is, I didn't know. And the burden is on OSHA. The burden is on OSHA that the employer had actual knowledge or constructive knowledge. That absent that knowledge, despite having some reasonable due diligence, we did all the things we just talked about. We did all that and we still didn't know, then that's a defense. Unpreventable employee misconduct is a defense. We all did what we were supposed to. And I was talking to a guy, good friend of mine over at Ogletree and Deacons. He said, that's the worst named defense ever. Because it has nothing to do with the employee. And I never thought about that. But he's absolutely right. It's all about the actions of the company. So the elements of unpreventable employee misconduct, there has to be a rule. That's your policy. Employee had to know the rule. That's your training. You had to have taken steps to discover, identify hazards and ensure compliance of all your safety rules. That's your job site inspection, right?
Disciplinary policy.
Disciplinary policy and evidence of enforcement of disciplinary policy. And the fifth one is we didn't know or reasonably couldn't have known. Another defense is no employee exposure. You and I used this in a case back this time last year where there were some hazards that were discovered during the inspection, but nobody was exposed to them. So if there's no exposure, there can be no risk. And then, if you're putting together reasonable prevention measures, that's also a defense to OSHA's multi-employer citation policy. I think what gets most people in trouble is they assume that all of these things are taken care of by contract. We write a good contract. We push this down liability. You may do that when it comes to civil liability. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But there are duties you cannot delegate both on the civil side and on the OSHA side.
So be very careful. Where the rubber meets the road, where implementation begins, it does not end, right? Implementation is an ongoing actions throughout your project, not just, documenting these things at the beginning of the project, but throughout the project and making sure everybody's on the same page. Probably will get you to a point where there's not much liability when it comes to multi-employer worksites. So great article, James. Great article.
Thank you. You can hop on over to my LinkedIn page. I think we also put it over there on the Risk Matrix podcast page. There are tons of references, links to that. I tried to give something that's practical in the hands of safety professionals. We could have a week-long class about all the cases that involve multi-employer citation situation. But I'm telling you, I've got cases right now that we didn't think was multi-employer, that
And
we thought we acted with
does.
due diligence, and now we've got citations, and my client's losing $1 million a month in revenue while we're contesting these citations. And part of it is, did we act reasonable enough? Did we do enough due diligence? We had a contract, we had requirements, but did we do enough from verification standpoint? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay, well, thanks for that, James. And again, for those of you who don't follow us, you should. You should follow us on the Risk Matrix, both on LinkedIn. You should follow us on Spotify. Let's highlight Spotify. We've been on Spotify now since we almost began the podcast. So that's exciting.
Spotify, people love us on Spotify. We are ranked. Did you know that? We are ranked.
You can
Spotify.
download, you can set up reminders for things to download to your phones so that you have them when you're commuting or you're working. Go ahead over there. Anywhere that podcasts are, we are too. So go ahead and like, subscribe, get those in real time as we drop every Tuesday. Either between the morning and noontime, we're dropping our episodes once a week. Something new. We also have a backlog that lives on YouTube and on Spotify and all our other podcast channels. Do follow us on LinkedIn. We both put out articles all the time. Things of general interest, things of specific interest that are going on in our consulting practice. We want you to participate with us. So clap back at us, give us some ideas. If you want to be a guest, let us know.
Man, I love a good debate. And I'll be the first one to tell you, if you're a safety professional that's never changed their mind about anything, you're not a very good safety professional, in my opinion. I've changed my mind over the years. It's evolved, and that should be a natural maturation of your career. You should evolve. You should change your perspective on certain things. You should add to your body of knowledge. That's why we do this. I may be wrong. It's okay. It's nothing personal. If you want to have a little debate about it, as long as it's respectful, I'm okay to opposing opinions. And certainly when it comes to certain different management systems, we may have to agree to disagree sometimes. But that's all right. We put this out there to have a healthy discussion so that we achieve all together the single goal of bringing all workers home safe from hazardous jobs. That's our goal. That's your goal. We appreciate all the likes. Again, I'm trying to challenge you. If you learned something today, hey, you must like and subscribe. If you had fun today, you must like and subscribe. It is the law. The law. Come down from on high. The law. You must like and subscribe to Risk Matrix. If you had fun, you learned something. But we appreciate.
Thanks again to VeriForce for powering us and for letting us do what we do and bring these things to you. And James, take us out.
Hey, thank y'all again. Check us out over on Apple Podcast. Hey, Alexa, play the Risk Matrix, Spotify, VeriForce's YouTube channel, our own LinkedIn page, the Risk Matrix Podcast. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Till next time, keep bringing those workers home safe. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Out, baby. Out. Happy Mardi Gras.